Welcome to Reinventing Broadcast, where AI meets content. Hosted by Ben Anchor. Let's dive in.
Welcome back to the show. Today we are going to go deeper into nowcasting than we have before. Not just what it is, but why it matters, how it translates into broadcast and streaming environments, and what it realistically looks like when you move from theory into application. Over the last few months, this idea has evolved significantly for me. It started in an academic setting during the UC Berkeley AI strategy program as a structured framework for near-term prediction. It was elegant, logical, and compelling on paper. But it only became powerful when I began mapping it onto real broadcast data, real scheduling decisions, and real commercial constraints. That is when it shifted from theory into something that can be taken to market.
Let's start cleanly. Define nowcasting in the simplest possible way.
Nowcasting is the practice of estimating what is happening right now and what is likely to happen in the immediate future using live or near-term signals. It compresses the time horizon of prediction. Forecasting typically asks what will happen next quarter or next year based on historical patterns. Nowcasting asks what is most likely to happen in the next few minutes or hours based on signals already available. That distinction sounds subtle, but in media it is significant because many performance outcomes are influenced by short-term decisions rather than long-term strategy.
Why is that compression of time so important for broadcasters and streamers?
Because traditional broadcast operations were built around predictability. Programming grids were set weeks in advance. Promos were rotated through fixed cycles. Break structures were predefined. Performance was reviewed retrospectively through ratings reports. That system worked extremely well when audience behaviour was relatively stable and channel loyalty was high. But today, the viewing environment is dynamic. Audiences switch platforms instantly. Devices fragment engagement. Competing streaming services influence attention in real time. External events such as sports, news, or even social trends can change viewing behaviour within minutes. In that environment, relying solely on lagging indicators leaves optimisation opportunities untapped.
So it is not that forecasting is wrong, it is that it is incomplete. For a fast-moving environment?
Yes, so forecasting still matters for strategic planning. But once strategic direction is defined, there are thousands of micro-decisions that shape actual performance. The order of promos, the sequencing within a break, the timing of a trailer, the transition between genres. Nowcasting focuses on improving those micro-decisions by interpreting behavioural signals in a structured way.
You mentioned that the original inspiration came from economics. How did that connect to media in your thinking?
Economists use nowcasting to estimate GDP before official figures are published. They gather high-frequency data, such as shipping movements, credit card transactions, and mobility trends, to estimate current economic conditions. The goal is not to predict the distant future, but to understand the present more accurately. When I heard that, I immediately thought about how broadcasters rely on yesterday's ratings to inform tomorrow's decisions. If economists can use near-term signals to improve economic estimates, why could broadcasters not use behavioural signals to refine scheduling decisions? That was the moment the analogy became practical.
Let's move from analogy to application. Where is the most logical starting point in a media organisation?
Promos are the natural entry point. They are short-form content pieces that appear frequently and carry lower risk than advertising contracts. Broadcasters invest heavily in creating promotional assets, yet placement decisions often rely on experience and historical norms rather than granular behavioural analysis. We know overall break retention, but rarely isolate whether a specific promo in a specific context influenced tune-out behaviour. Nowcasting enables a more precise question. Given the signals present at that moment, was there a more effective option?
Walk through how a model would approach that without making arbitrary assumptions.
The process begins with data that most broadcasters already possess. As-run logs provide second-by-second records of what aired. Audience measurement systems provide retention curves and tune-out points. Metadata describes genre, duration, tone, and targeting. When those datasets are aligned across thousands of historical breaks, correlations emerge. For example, shorter promos may consistently reduce drop-off during weekday evenings. Certain genre pairings may increase session continuation. Device type may influence tolerance for longer creative. The model identifies these patterns and learns probabilistic relationships. It can then simulate alternative scenarios. If promo B replaced promo A in that context, what would the predicted retention curve have been? The output is not absolute certainty. It is a probability estimate. But when applied systematically, even small percentage improvements can compound into meaningful commercial impact.
Does this mean broadcasters need to rebuild their playout systems?
There would have to be integration work, but not in the initial phase. One of the key insights from recent work is that nowcasting can begin as a contained desktop exercise. You analyze historical data offline. You test whether measurable optimization signal exists. There is no need to alter live operations or implement automation at the outset. The first milestone is evidence. If no meaningful signal appears, you stop. If signal is measurable, you build internal confidence and consider limited live testing later.
You have also discussed fast channels as a strong proving ground. Why are they particularly suited to this approach?
Fast channels operate in high variance environments. They are ad-funded and experience high churn. Viewers can exit instantly and switch to alternative content. That volatility means even small improvements in retention can translate into revenue uplift. Fast ecosystems often provide richer device-level behavioral data and tend to have fewer legacy constraints than traditional linear broadcasters. That makes experimentation more feasible. If you can demonstrate a 1 or 2% uplift at break level across multiple channels, the aggregate commercial effect can be substantial.
Beyond promos and fast, how does the roadmap evolve?
After promo optimization, the next step is commercial break optimization, where ad sequencing and promo placement are analyzed together. Then, potentially linear channel application, particularly in long-tail scheduling blocks. Beyond that, programming grid refinement, where content sequencing across hours is evaluated. Eventually, adaptive or semi-personalized channel logic may emerge, though that requires deeper integration. Each stage increases complexity and data requirements, but the sequencing principle remains important. Validate signal before scaling.
What have you learned about the organizational dynamics of approaching something like this?
Technical feasibility is only part of the equation. Commercial alignment is critical. Delivery partners often prefer cost certainty, whereas exploratory initiatives involve uncertainty. Incentive alignment, governance clarity, and defined evaluation metrics must be established early. Nowcasting sits at the intersection of editorial expertise, data science capability, and commercial strategy. That intersection requires coordination and trust.
What does a realistic pilot look like in terms of scope and duration?
A contained pilot might analyze, say, a month of historical data for a specific channel, for example December, so rerun Christmas. You would isolate defined break types, simulate alternative content choices, and quantify predicted retention uplift. The outputs would include uplift curves, scenario comparisons, and confidence intervals. The objective is not perfection, it is directional evidence. If the evidence supports measurable optimization potential, you refine the model and consider phased deployment.
Let's talk about measurement. How do you avoid overfitting or drawing false conclusions?
That is a crucial point. Proper validation requires holdout datasets, cross-validation techniques, and clear separation between training and testing data. You avoid tuning the model purely to historical anomalies. You focus on consistent patterns across time periods. Statistical discipline is essential. Without it, optimization claims lack credibility.
Where could nowcasting deliver the strongest return, do you think?
Where behavioural variability is high and commercial sensitivity to retention is strong. Ad-funded streaming, fast ecosystems and promo-heavy environments offer immediate opportunity. It delivers less benefit in highly stable, rigid scheduling environments where experimentation appetite is limited. Nowcasting is not universal. It is targeted optimisation.
You have spoken a lot about incremental gains. Why emphasise incremental rather than transformative change?
Because incremental gains compound. A 1% improvement in retention across hundreds of breaks accumulates quickly. Media markets are competitive and margins are tight. Transformational promises often fail because they aim too high too quickly. Nowcasting succeeds when positioned as disciplined optimization rather than dramatic overhaul.
What excites you most personally about this shift?
The idea that decision-making can remain human but become more informed.
Editorial instinct does not disappear. It becomes augmented. Nowcasting provides structured feedback loops. It encourages a culture of testing and refinement. In a fragmented attention economy, small improvements matter disproportionately. If a broadcaster listening today is curious, what should their first internal conversation be?
It should start with data readiness. Confirm access to as-run logs, retention curves and metadata. Assess data quality and alignment. Then, define a contained hypothesis, such as whether shorter promos reduce drop-off during evening peaks. Run analysis. Measure predicted uplift. Document findings. Share insights internally. Build momentum through evidence rather than persuasion alone.
And the long-term cultural implication?
The long-term implication is a shift toward comfort with near-term optimization. Organizations become more willing to experiment within controlled boundaries. They move from reactive reporting toward proactive refinement. Strategy remains important, but execution becomes smarter. Let's bring this full circle. If you had to summarize nowcasting in one sentence for a broadcast executive, what would it be? Nowcasting is a disciplined way to use real-time or near-term behavioral signals to improve the next decision without disrupting long-term strategy.
That is clear and grounded.
And that is intentional. Nowcasting is not about predicting distant futures. It is about improving what happens next. In media, what happens next influences retention, revenue, and relevance. The organizations that become comfortable refining the next decision consistently will outperform those that rely solely on retrospective analysis. Thank you for listening. If this discussion sparked ideas, begin the internal audit. Explore your data. Ask whether measurable signal exists. Start small and build deliberately. Because in today's media environment, standing still is still a decision. And nowcasting is about choosing better ones. Catch you next time on the next show.
Thanks for listening to Reinventing Broadcast. Subscribe for more on AI content and the future of media. And visit Ancast.tv for more info on Ben himself, the resources, other content, and news.